Hello and welcome back to the FSF podcast. I am Tim, I am your host, and this is the show that is made by this nerd for you nerds. So I'm hoping that you guys enjoy what's coming your way tonight. Now, our guest in the nerdatorium tonight, in this pseudo nerdatorium, because it's still too cold and I'm a sissy and I don't want to be cold out in the garage where my office is. So in the pseudo nerdatorium tonight is kind of unique to our show in respect to what they bring to the table. Now, and I use that analogy very specifically, and you'll find out why in a second. Now, our guest tonight is a brand anthropologist, which I thought was a really cool introduction. Brand anthropologist, a consultant. He's a television host. He's a speaker. You've probably seen him, I know I have, on the History Channel and shows like The Food That Built America and the Mega Brands That Built America. And there's a couple other shows that he's involved with on the History Channel. So far, nothing History Channel after dark, but we can talk to him about the potential after that. You know, what that requires for him, but, you know, whatever. But tonight we're going to talk about how he got into his work, how that led him to working on shows like Stranger Things and a few others. So please help me welcome, and this is perhaps the best nickname of anybody that I've ever had on this show, and I'm so geeked to use this nickname because it made me giggle when I read it. Please help me welcome the Indiana Jones of snacks, freaking Indiana Jones of snacks, Jason Liebig, to the show. Welcome to the show, Jason.
Hi, Tim. Thank you for having me.
Thank you. Yeah, I saw that earlier, and so the funny thing is, I'm a massive Harrison Ford fan. Like,
nice,
Han Solo is my favorite character in Star Wars. Indiana Jones is, well, freaking Indiana Jones. And so I was like, Indiana Jones of snacks. Hell yeah, we're gonna talk to Indiana Jones. So I got a little excited about that.
Yeah, so, I got excited when someone called me that, and I was like, I'm using that.
Oh, dude, I'd have that on business cards. It'd be on every T-shirt I own. I'm like,
that's true.
Been one time, and I'd be like, I am Indiana Jones.
Yes.
So, all right, so to kick this whole discussion off here, Jason, because I got to move away from that, or I'm going to giggle about it all night.
Yeah, sure.
So the very first question I always like to ask people and talk to them about, because I like to know what makes people tick. Why they do what they do, why they got involved with the career path that they've chosen.
Yeah.
So I'm going to alter this question just a little bit for you.
Yeah.
Because you're pretty heavy into food and understanding where food goes. And I mean, not just like in the mouth and into the belly and then, subsequent travels after that. But so I always ask like to ask people rather, what got them started in the business. So for you, the origin story of the Indiana Jones of snacks, what food or what snack got you here to the point where you're like,
ooh,
I want to be a brand anthropologist. This is my Rosetta Stone. This is where I'm starting.
I mean, look, Tim, the path that I've been on, as a lot of people's paths are, was serpentine and at times confusing and maze-like. There was no clear indication that I would ever end up where I've ended up. But it's sort of, I've followed my curiosity and followed my passion, and it's driven me to certain places. And a lot of it I didn't expect. But it's, and weirdly enough, I mean, I can tell you the whole origin story, but weirdly enough, I came at this from a place you're very familiar with. I came at this from personal nostalgia and sort of nerdiness. That was my window onto this path, or that was where the path opened up to me. And then it opened up to this larger world because of the way I approached it. So that's a very short, unclear description of my path, but I can give you the specifics as well.
You had me at hello.
All right. So,
I always say long answers are good answers. So go for it.
Yeah. So I started my career, I grew up in Nebraska, but I started my career in New York City 31 years ago. I went to New York City to work in the comic book business, and I was very fortunate. I got a job at DC Comics, working in marketing. I worked there for about a year, then I left. And then about a year after that, I got hired at Marvel Comics in editorial. The greatest job, close to the greatest job I've ever had. I think the job I'm doing now is probably cooler or better in a lot of ways. Although I was working on the X-Men in the creative department is pretty freaking amazing. But anyway, so while I was there, because I did not have a design background, I got what I called an informal design education. When we would get cover art in, we'd go to the scanning room, whatever, it would be shot or scanned. Because we were still, back then, you still dealt with all the original artwork. It'd all come in the morning in FedExes. I would open up the FedExes, take them to the stat room and get things statted, whatever. But then this was during the early part of digital putting things together, but I would sit with the guys in the Marvel bullpen as they would be putting our cover copy onto this artwork each month. And so I would sit there with guys in the bullpen, a lot of times this great guy named Johnny Green, and he would teach me what he was doing, because I would ask him questions. What are you doing now? Why are you doing it like that? What I would learn, it's like you can't have the logo colors the same color every month because people are only going to see this part of the cover, so it has to look different. It's like, so you have to do these things, why they chose certain colors. I learned about terms like negative space and publishing terms like CMYK and trapping, so that things wouldn't bleed off and all this stuff.
Right.
And so I got this great publishing, design, education. So when I ultimately left Marvel Comics about 5 years later, I had gained a sort of hobbyist interest in design. And that was really the thing that spurred me to discover the pathway in. So about 2 years after I left Marvel, it's about 2002, I was up in Boston shooting a film. I had a day off. This was before the advent of smartphones or social media. Well, not social media, but kind of modern social media. There were no TikToks or Instagram, any of that stuff. There's no ability to kill time the way we can kill time now. And, and as an interesting aside, I do wonder if social media and smartphones existed back then, whether I would have just stayed in my hotel room and my life would have taken on a completely different path. And I think it's yeah, no, it is. And it's something that we can sort of talk about. I mean, it's how not having those options sort of drove you. So anyway, I went to a Barnes & Noble. There was a Barnes & Noble down the street from the hotel that I was put up in. And I was hanging out in the design section of the Barnes & Noble. And there was a book in the design section called Crazy Kids Food. It was all about kids' food packaging from the 50s, 60s, and 70s. And written by a guy named Dan Goodsell, who's now a good friend of mine, and Steve Roden, who has since passed away. And I just poured over this book and was obsessed with it. I didn't realize that you could save old food packaging. And these guys had it, and they photographed it for this book. And I thought, wow, this stuff is so cool. And somewhere that day or in the following days, I thought to myself, you know what? I think back in my office at home, where I have my computer desk, I just want to get like a hot tamales box from when I was a kid, a super sugar crisp cereal box from when I was a kid, and a Marathon bar wrapper, this great 1970s, 1980s wrapper. And I thought, and then I'll be happy. That was it. I said, I'll get those three things, and that'll be good. Little did I know. The interesting thing was, though, because look, I was a comic guy, I was a trading card guy, whatever, cartoon, I was an action figure guy, I loved all that stuff. Collected a lot of those things. But what I realized when I started going onto eBay at the time was that, like, if you wanted like Amazing Fantasy 15, the first appearance of Spider-Man, you could go and get that on eBay any day of the week, right? You just needed a bunch of money to do it. But if you wanted a 1970s or 1980s Hot Tamales box, good luck. Wait around a couple of years maybe, and hope. And ultimately that's what I ended up doing. And also, the other back half of that was if you wanted to see pictures of this stuff on the internet, there were none. I always say there were about 300 to 400 images of like old candy wrappers, old snack packaging, but that was kind of it. And most of those, I would say 99% of those were published by Dan Goodsell, the co-writer of that book, and another woman named Darlene Lacey, who created a website called the Candy Wrapper Museum. Still a great website and still around. Darlene's still around and she's doing great work. So they were sort of responsible for all the stuff that was on the internet in this category. So I'm looking for these three pieces. I'm on eBay. And when I can't find them, because I've got that little degenerate collector part of me inside,
Right.
I was like, you know what? I can't find that super sugar crisp cereal box. Maybe I'll buy that old cereal box. That's kind of cool looking. I'll buy that. And then I started buying that, and I started buying whatever candy stuff I could find. But then I started, each piece I would get, I would scan in high resolution, front and back, and then I would publish to my Flickr, which was an image sharing website at the time.
remember
It's still
Flickr,
around.
yeah.
Yeah, so I became a dedicated, maniacal, obsessed collector and archivist on Flickr. And I always tell people, and this is the crazy part, I had this rule for the first like 7 or 8 years I was on Flickr, and it was very simple. If there was already an image of this thing online, whatever it is, whatever package or item, a hot tamales box, whatever it was, I said, I'm not interested, right? I'm only going to get stuff that you can't see right now. That was a very hard
Okay.
rule. And so in the next decade, I probably published around 10,000 images of things that you
Oh,
couldn't
wow.
otherwise see images of. So, and unfortunately, because I had no idea, because literally when I started, Google image search did not exist. You could Google and images would come back, but there wasn't a dedicated image search, right? There was no Pinterest,
Right.
there's none of stuff. So I didn't watermark anything because I didn't realize how prevalent image sharing would become once people got smartphones, because this was before smartphones, right?
Right. Yeah.
And so I became known to designers, people, to brands as this guy who had this sort of archive of all this packaging before anybody was really doing anything like that. And at a point in 2009, I decided to really lean in on candy, which I did because I had acquired this collection, and with 700 pieces, I documented all of them. Launched a website in 2012 called collectingcandy.com. In the next 8 years, I would publish about 650 articles on that, another 6,500 images from the archives. And then somewhere in 2017, late 2016, I had an opportunity to help develop a TV show for Travel Channel, which ended up shifting over to Cooking Channel. It was all about the history of junk food, but we wouldn't use the term junk food because brands don't like that.
No, they're not fans
And
of
it
that,
was
no.
sort of, and it was birthed out of all this nostalgia, and then sort of all the things that have happened since are a whole series of events, some expected, some unexpected, some incredible, fortunate pieces of luck, and just a lot of consistency of doing this kind of stuff and talking about these messages. And then it led to brand consulting, and I've leaned in on that a lot more, corporate speaking. And certainly for the last 6 years, I've been on History Channel like every Sunday, like all day long. It's been so good and so wonderful. And it's allowed me to do, like, I'm doing 4 shows in 2026 for the network, and only one of them really talks about food. That's the other crazy thing. The other 3 aren't even food related as a rule.
That's awesome.
But so it's been a crazy journey. But it did not start because I was obsessed with food. I was obsessed with design. I was obsessed with packaging.
That's cool.
But I've become far more versed in food. I mean, I have friends that are food chemists. Like, whenever I have like a lunch or a coffee with them, I'm like, I just try to absorb as much as I can, and I've absorbed a lot. Like, it's fascinating. I was a guest. Like, it was so wild. Like, I was a guest at a thing called the Research Chefs Association. And I'm like, well, I have no business being there. I don't know. But they watched the show, and so they had me there, and I just had the best conversations for 3 hours. I learned so much, from people growing sunflower seeds and talking about how, we're going to make flavored bacon be the greatest thing in the 21st century. I was like, grape flavored bacon, let's do it. No, so that's the sort of origin story. It really came from an interest in design that I gained at Marvel Comics. That was it. Yeah, that's the origin
story. That's a really
story.
cool story, man.
Yeah, it's wild.
No, that is really cool. I love it when people's origin stories, like you said, it was a little bit of serpentine, and I call it the squid and the squid. Where you're going this way, and you're going that way, and you're going that way. But yeah, I like those types of stories because, and I was just talking to somebody actually last night. I often find that the people that we talk to here on this show are never really just one thing. They come on the show because they're doing this thing in their career, but they have this knowledge or interest in these other things, or they're making these other things also part of a profession of something they do. And I love stories like that because now, just looking at the information that I received from your PR team and the information that I found about you online, I was like, all right, this dude loves food. We're going to talk about food. And so, I mean, not that you don't appreciate food, but it's cool to me that this all comes from a design background, and an appreciation for design. That's really kind of that's like the ultimate Easter egg in all of this to me, is that I thought we were going one direction with the conversation.
Interesting.
And
that's fine.
Which was still fine. It was still a good way to go because food, but on the other hand, to know that it comes from a little bit of a design background from your time at Marvel is kind of mind blowing to me.
It's wild, cool. Right? No, it blows my mind too. And the other thing I said before, if I had a smartphone, maybe I wouldn't be doing what I do. The other thing I've been saying for many years I said, look, if there would have been like a website or an encyclopedia that had a photo of all this stuff, right? I would have bought that book or bookmarked that website, spent 100 hours on it in the next year, but then I wouldn't have done this because someone had already done it. And because this subject matter for me, food brands, all this kind of stuff, branding was so undocumented. It was a really fun place to just go exploring. Like if you are a nerd and you love to go and just research and exploring and finding things, it's fun. You know, like there's very little, if you're into comic books or Porsches or Ferraris, where there's very little new to discover. Not that you can't love it. There's the new stuff certainly coming out, and there's always new fun stuff. And that's the way with branded food as well. But like I am discovering like brand extensions for well-known brands that existed 30 years ago, 40 years ago that blow my mind, like flavors of things. Like earlier this year, I found out in the early 70s, Nabisco at that time, Nabisco owned the Sugar Babies brand. And they made a hot cinnamon iteration of Sugar Babies. So imagine it's sort of like a cross between Sugar Babies and hot tamales. It was a sweetened caramel, same exact manufacturing process, but they added a hot cinnamon flavor to it. They did not call it hot cinnamon Sugar Babies. They gave it a different name. They called it flamethrowers, which I thought was great. And but I had never heard of them. In 20 years of research, I'd never heard of them, never seen a reference to them in all this old trade materials. And I have now a wrapper, a package for that. And it's just like, were it not for that one little scrap of physical evidence, this is the Indiana Jones of it, right? This is the Indiana Jones of the stuff. Were it not for that little scrap of paper, I would not know that thing exists. And that weird little thing, like I have that happen all the time. Like I met this guy who had worked on the Lifesavers brand in the 70s and the 80s. And he had in his personal portfolio a test market Lifesavers can, a soda can. Like Lifesavers did a soda. Lifesavers did a soda through the 7-Up company, I think, in the 80s. Fairly well known, but still pretty collectible. But in the early 70s, they worked with Pepsi Cola. They made 3 flavors of a Lifesavers soda. They only sold it in California. But I've talked to this guy since, and I said, look, if it weren't for you, you are the only evidence that even existed. And that's from Pepsi and from Lifesavers. These are not small brands.
Right.
But you can Google your brains out. You will not find a reference to this product, on the internet at all. And I'm like, there's a can for it sitting in the next room over there.
That is
the only one I know that exists. No, nobody did. I mean, I didn't. And I'd been at this, every day. Like, this is all I think about every day, for 20 years.
Cool.
But yeah, so in comic books, like, you're not going to find, it's possible, but you're not going to find, 5 issues of John Romita's Spider-Man that no one knows exist. You know what I mean? Like that doesn't get to happen, generally speaking.
You might find some unfinished sketches or something, but you're not going to find a whole book that never
absolutely
existed.
Yes. No, there's and so in food, what I love about it is it's so poorly documented. You can routinely find things that are equivalent to finding this is the album that the Beatles did right after the White Album, but they decided not to publish it. It's just like, oh, what?
Right. Yeah.
So that stuff is really exciting for me. So
okay. So
as a nerd.
No, hey, we all have to have something to nerd out on. And this is actually more interesting than I was giving it. This is way more interesting than I was giving it credit for, because I'm learning stuff now. And I do love the fact I love to learn things. So this is cool.
Yeah.
Cool. All right. So this whole career path, though, has allowed you to serve as a consultant on multiple television shows and other things to make sure that the brands that are being used, have proper branding and imaging, and that it elicits, I'm sure, to help elicit certain feelings and memories and things like that. But I was hoping that you might be able to tell us how that, archivist, anthropologistness of yourself, I'm sure that's not a word, but I'm making it one, affects the show. I think probably the most recent example would be the show Stranger Things.
Yes.
And why your role as a consultant and a brand anthropologist is so vital for a show like that.
Yeah, it's a great question, Tim. I like to tell people we have, and I think this is very evident, we have become over the last 3 decades, 4 decades, we've become a much more brand-centric society than we ever have been in the past. We wear our brands with pride. We associate ourselves with brands. We more, 20 years ago, the only people who were worried about their personal brand were like 1% of the population. I think probably 30% of professionals or just people are working on their personal brand, right? Like you are almost required
yeah.
to. Yeah. And so
Yeah.
we are obsessed with brand. We are obsessed with all these things. And so I always usually give Happy Days as an example. And if someone hasn't heard of Happy Days was a television show that came out in the 1970s. It was set in the 1950s. So back then in the 1970s, because we weren't nearly as brand centric as we are now, when you wanted to establish that the show was in the 50s and it was set in a period of time in the past, you would make sure the clothing was right, period accurate, the hairstyles, the music, the cars, the slang, if you could get it. But you weren't really worried about the right box of Oxidol sitting in the background. You weren't worried about the branding. The branding was almost always pretty generic.
Right.
But as long as you got those other things, the music, the cars, the hairstyle, the clothes, you were good. But nowadays, when you want to establish it's like it's the 80s, you still want to do the cars and the music and the hairstyles and the clothes. You still want to do all that. But now it's like there are so many brands or even like that don't exist or just the way they used to look is so specific. That's a much bigger part of our lived experience. And so if you can put those things in the background or have a character interact with them, it becomes this powerful emotive thing that really brings you in. It's much more immersive. It brings you into the immersion of the whole moment. Like what they did in Loki season 2 with that McDonald's. And I've talked to the guys at the McDonald's archive who worked on that. Like, when that production, when Marvel Studios were working with McDonald's to try to rebuild all that, I think they had literally sent fryers from the archives, like vintage fryers, over to England where they were shooting. And they were trying to get the production team was so specific. They were trying to get like, what would it have sounded like in a McDonald's in the 70s? What did the fries beep? Like, what was that sound? Can we get recordings of that? That was that kind of thing. So they were trying to get so specific. So just the background noise of a McDonald's, like how did the equipment sound differently? And so, different people, and don't get me wrong, I've worked with a lot of different productions. Different people try different levels of trying to get it right. But for Stranger Things, for instance, one of the ways I got into this, and there was a woman who worked on Mad Men, a wonderful woman named Ellen Freund. And Ellen at one point had been looking for something, and then her Google searches of her art team or whatever prop team led them to me. And then like 6 months later, they were looking for something totally different, like I think it was an FAO Schwarz shopping bag from the 60s, and a toy store shopping bag. And that Google search also led them to me. And Ellen at one point, she goes, I got to say, like, all roads lead to Jason where this stuff is concerned. I was like, oh, that's great. I'm going to use that. It's not as good as Indiana Jones, but I said all roads lead to Jason. That's very good.
So Indiana Jones on one side, all roads lead to Jason on the other side. That's how you do this.
Yeah. So if you look at Stranger Things, for instance, they're building season 1. They're building this show. It's set in the 80s. There's a thing in the script about Eggo waffles, right? A pretty big thing, right? Yes. And so, well, when they Googled 1980s Eggo waffle box, there is literally only one result. And it is my Eggo waffle box that I have published to Flickr. And it was the only image of a 1980s Eggo waffle box on the entire internet. And that is true.
That's crazy.
And that is how, and look, they come to you, whatever, they use it, and it's like, and that's how these things begin. And now, because I've worked on so many shows, I know so many people, it's less a Google search and more sometimes a person knows a person or whatever, or I've worked with people, because I have had to repeat, when I did Queen's Gambit, this show, I think it was a Netflix show, Queen's Gambit, but I had worked with that art team. I think I'd worked with that art team on like Monuments Men like 5 years earlier. And so, they come back, but I worked on like all 10 seasons of the Goldbergs. I've worked on all but the first season of Young Sheldon, and now I'm working on the Young Sheldon spinoff. There was a great gig, one of the biggest gigs. I say it's great just because it was so voluminous. I did so much work for them. It was like 4 solid months of this Apple TV show starring Tom Holland. It was like a 10-episode series, but we recreated a 1970s A&P grocery store aisle, like the cereal aisle and the snack.
Yeah.
And I was like, and it was so much work, but it was great because I was like coming out of COVID and I had worked for a while and I was like kind of living on my credit cards. And I was like, no, like this gig came along. I was like, oh my God. So I was just like, I was nose to the grindstone in my archives for like 4 months straight. I must have curated like 500 pieces for them, 800 pieces, but then they choose from that. But it was just like, but then I've got all these old, for research, I've curated like old grocery store trade magazines, like grocery industry magazines that were only sold like to grocery managers. So I've got all these old progressive grocery magazines from the late 70s. So I was like scanning in like what the aisles looked like and like where you would buy fruit, what the price tags would look like, what the shelf tags would look like, all this stuff, like what the green stamp sign would look like at the checkout. So I had all this great reference I was providing.
Green stamps.
Yeah. And so anyway, so it was a lot of fun, and to your point, like you talked about what those things mean, emotive or whatever. And I was like, I always ask a production, like, what is it? What's your aim with the packaging? Is it just to bring us into the vibe of the era? Is there some specific interaction you want to have? And that can, like with Mad Men, they wanted you to be specific to like 6 months, right? Like, they were like, this has to be the version of the brand that was on the shelf in August of 1968. And so that's a very, very, very difficult challenge because products were not necessarily labeled as such that it's easy to do that just from the package itself. With the Tom Holland show, I offered up, I said, listen, you guys, you want to fill so much space. We're not just throwing 2-3 packages in the back. We're going to have a whole aisle. I said, would it be all right to sort of do it 76 to 79? Like give us a 4-year period. So it's like, so we can draw packaging from that. Yes, we're not going to, there's not going to be a time when maybe all these products were literally on the shelf at the exact same time, but they're all late 70s. And they were like, yeah. And interestingly enough, in that show, they had a big anachronism. It was set in like 1978 or 79, but they had this whole scene talking about Quisp and Quake cereal. And they had long since been discontinued. I remember talking to them, I was like, those products were like discontinued like 1972, right? And they're like, it's fine. It's really important to the writer. I was like, okay. So that happens too. That happens too. But that's how it happens. It was sort of like I was the first person to document all this stuff. And so that led to sort of accidentally getting involved. And then that turned into, then I got more organized and, and more professional about it. And then when people came, I just worked my ass off to make sure they were happy. And, and it's nice, it's nice when now, because people come to me, they think I'm sort of known as getting things nobody else can get, or have. And so, and I have a network of other people I'll reach out to. It's like, hey, you have one of these, in your collection or whatever, so I've done that too. I've called upon my network of collectors. So yeah, but it's a lot of fun and it's a nice little side hustle, occasionally it pays for my eBay for a month or whatever. and justifies buying all the stuff that I buy to my wife, because I was like,
well, that's the win right there, brother.
Right? No, that's the life hack for a collector. Make it your profession. Figure out a way to make it your profession. Yeah.
I got to get better at the Funko thing. Okay.
Yes.
All right. So let me ask you this about that mindset of getting things to be visually accurate. So obviously there's not a lot of these. So obviously there, are we recreating sections of this with printed samples, like reprinting these, or is this a CGI thing, or how are they going about this? Because
it's a great question. I mean, typically, like what we will do is I will have a label, can label, a cereal box. They get high resolution scans. They recreate it from that. And then they basically have it printed, and then they're basically making a copy of whatever piece I have. I wish I had it with me. I don't. But that Eggo waffle box, for instance, that Stranger Things used, I bought that from a woman who bought it in 1985 or whatever. She was a refunder, a person who saved packaging to mail in for offers, right?
Okay.
And they were kind of like couponers. But they started in the 60s, and they would say, first they would just say box tops, but then the manufacturers were like, wait a second, we do a thing to like get silverware, and all of a sudden these people are sending in box tops on day one. They're just saving the box tops, right, of our products.
Right.
And so there's like an arms race. Well, we're going to ask for like the E and the Eggo waffle logo or whatever, or we're going to ask for a different thing. Or when UPCs come up, we're going to ask for the UPC. So what the refunders started doing in this arms race, they said, we're just going to save the whole packaging. So they would start to have file cabinets just full of packaging. So for me,
Oh, wow.
And most of them, before I really got into this in a major way, most of them had gotten rid of their collections in the 90s, because once the internet came out, it all kind of went away. People didn't do mail-ins like that anymore. But this particular refunder, she was still around. But here's the fun thing about it. This is an Easter egg, or as I did not come up with this, an Easter Eggo. The Eggo waffle box, if you go back and watch in season 1 of the show, this woman, this lovely woman, she had actually cut around the UPC code and peeled it off, right? Peeled off the cardboard to mail away for something. There's like a fun club kit on the back of that box. And I think she might have mailed in for that. But she didn't cut a hole through the box. It didn't go all the way through. There was just a white exposed cardboard there. So my scans just had that exposed cardboard. That went off to the production, right? They reprinted from that. They didn't add the yellow or the UPC back in. They just left that blank white square. So if you go back and freeze frame any scene where Eleven is like walking to the grocery store with all the Eggo waffle box, in every single scene, you will see one of the boxes or 3 of the boxes like lined up in a way that you see this weird white square that does not belong in that box. And that's because their art department was like, whatever, we don't know what that is. Just go with it, because that was season 1.
That's kind of cool.
Yeah.
So I'll go back and watch that. I'll be like, thank you, Jason.
Right. That's your Easter egg. But so generally with me, I'm sending scans over. They are recreating things. With like the Tom Holland thing, it was wild because like I would send, again, this was a volume of material. So I would send over all the scans. They would get like a tranche of like 30 scans. Their art department would then be cleaning them up because a lot of them were worn up. These were 30-year-old, 40-year-old, 50-year-old pieces of packaging. They would be cleaning up the foxing, the bends or whatever, make it look new.
Sure.
And then they would send them off to a company that basically probably printed packaging, and they would print reproductions of all this old packaging that they would then, like, okay, here's a section. It's all this exact same box. We're going to, stock this and then stock this and stock this. And so that's how it went. And so that's always fun to see like how this stuff looks after it gets cleaned up, after it gets printed professionally.
Yeah.
Like, that's pretty cool. It's like reviving it almost, So it's kind of like a time machine.
And it's one of the things that I've noticed over the past few 5, 10 or so years in pop culture when we're watching shows. It used to be like it would look like a Coke can, but it would just say cola on the side.
Yes.
And so you could get the visual clue that it was supposed to be this thing. Because like I'm a big fan of the show Big Bang Theory, and
of course,
I'll rewatch that, while I'm doing paperwork or I'm doing research for, having a guest on, and that'll just be in the background. And, one day they're sitting at their work cafeteria, and there's 3 or 4 soda cans on the table there. And you can clearly tell one of them is a Sprite, one of them is a Squirt, one of them is a Coke Classic. And I don't remember what the 4th one was.
Yeah.
But they all had, it was clearly that's what the branding, what they were looking for, going towards.
Yeah.
But it was not those things. It was, something very similar, but quite different.
Yeah. No, it's, there's sort of 2 pathways on this. There is the fact that because people fast forward through commercials, what is it called? Inserting brands into shows, right? It's paid placement, Product placement. Yeah, product placement is a big thing. Typically with like the vintage stuff, because I work with these teams, a lot of times like when an old pouch of Big League Chew showed up in the Goldbergs, that was not product placement. Like Big League Chew was not paying for that. But then what you have is your clearances department. So the clearance department will then, if they want to put someone's brand in there, they will then get clearance to do that, to make sure they have permission, so they're not violating someone's intellectual property rights. That's why sometimes, and when there's not a product placement, but they still want to have like a hamburger helper or whatever, sometimes you'll see where they'll have a knockoff, but if they can't get that, they'll just see like weird colored tape over part of the logo so you can't read it, and it's just like, it just looks like a burr help. It's like, oh, okay. It's like, but the rest of the box is kind of there. You can see the product. So it sort of still functions what it is. And I also think there's a thing like, once like 4K started coming out, it's like a lot of that stuff could be hidden in old standard def, but like once you went high def and everything, it's like, all of a sudden now we
Oh
can see like, like watching old episodes of Friends or whatever. Oh yeah, you see, like that's the thing in the background that no one was supposed to be able to read. Or
Right,
Seinfeld, because Seinfeld always had cereal boxes in his apartment,
Mm-hmm.
you know. But no, so it's
remember.
interesting. So there's things. There's lots of branding now.
It's funny to me that you mentioned Hamburger Helper, because I don't remember what show it was on, but I remember seeing one years ago, and I don't remember if it was a TV show or a movie, but I just remember seeing it, and it made me laugh because it was called Burger Assist instead of instead of Hamburger Helper. It was Burger Assist on the box.
I feel like I've seen that one, and I wish I could remember. No, it's like, and now the other thing too is sometimes they're like so clever or close. I was like, man, I wish I could get that prop.
Right? Yeah.
I want a box of Burger Assist for my shelf at home.
It would be fun to have. I will agree with that. Very much so. All right. So Jason, here's a topic I would love to get your insight on. And because honestly, before doing research into you, your background, all these things, it's something that I did not give much thought to. But in your opinion, why or how did sci-fi, superheroes, and candy become so intertwined? And is it video game related?
Okay, look, I don't want to toot my own horn. 15, 16, 17 years ago. 15, 16, 17 years ago, I was like, look, here's the thing. There are pillars of geek culture. That's the term I was using back then. Geek culture. I was like, it's cartoons, movies, video games, toys, comic books. I said, these are the pillars of geek culture. And I promise you, I said, I think snacks and candy can be the fifth pillar of geek culture. I almost launched a podcast called The Fifth Pillar, right? I was going to do all this shit. Anyway. Okay. But I said, one of the problems is the reason why nerds like us are not connecting to this part of it is because there were no anchors, right? There was no way to look at stuff and say, oh, I remember that. And what I mean by that is I've already told the story about when I started, you couldn't see 90% of this stuff. So unless you were very passionate, and specifically wanted to go out and see it, you couldn't see it. Now, because of the work I've done, published 30,000 things over the last 25 years, and then other people have done this similar work. But like, if you wanted to reconnect with that part of your nerdiness, that part of, I'm jumping ahead, but the part of the thing is too, that primordial adolescent stew of where you develop a love for video games, a love for cartoons, a love for toys, a love for movies, that during that era, you do develop a love for these brands, these candy, these snacks, right? It's just later on, you can't grab a hold of the nostalgia because it's not out there. And so This is where I'm tooting my own horn. I have created a foundation of nostalgic anchors. And I know that I've done that. And, people who know the area there was like, oh man, no, you were the guy who went out and like just published so much stuff. Still to this day, a lot of good, if you Google an old candy wrapper, a snack package, whatever it is, chances are the image you're going to bring up on Google Images is something I've published. What that allowed us to do, I will say this, I remember I was going to my local comic shop in Lincoln, Nebraska when I was in college, and in like 1990, and I'd never collected action figures before in 1990, but there was this thing called the Tomart's Action Figure Guide, a hardcover book all about a price guide of action figures, but all these color photos of all these really cool old action figures. Okay. And I was like, and I remember once I bought that book and I was like, oh my God, like I want to start collecting action figures. I didn't even know you could do this. So once I've created like the anchors for you to go out and understand that this stuff existed and you could re-experience it in a way, a couple of things happened. First thing, BuzzFeed created the idea of a listicle, and they're still making them. I mean, other people are making them too, but like it was top 10 snack foods you remember from when you were a kid, or top 10 80 snack foods you'll never see again. Yeah. Well, inevitably, I was like, those guys, I'm not going to be kind, but they just raped my archives. They were just pulling from my archives left and right because there were no other images of those things. People kind of remember that. But then that started to infuse the culture. And as smartphones and as all the stuff, and once you started to see like 80s websites and 80s accounts, and they were just starting to share and you could see the stuff again. Once you could see it, it became more and more a part of everything. And parallel to that, like, and again, nerd stuff and geek stuff is one thing, but parallel to that, I was also saying 20 years, not only was it going to be part part of geek culture. It was going to be part of our larger entertainment. And it sounded insane. And don't get me wrong, I had my doubts myself, but I felt confident. And because of the way we experience social media, because of people want to be a part of things, now when a new flavor of Oreo cookie comes out, a new flavor, it's like reported on people.com and Entertainment Weekly's website. This was, when I was spouting this stuff off to people I knew, colleagues, old comic book people, I think I sounded like a madman 20 years ago. But sort of what I predicted and what I prognosticated in many respects has come to fruition, and now it simply exists as part of our conversations now. Now when people are geeking out about Star Wars and the Marvel movies, they're also geeking out about Stranger Things bringing back the boppers, peanut butter boppers.
Yeah.
And, I mean, look, I've had a relationship with Stranger Things, and so I helped put a lot of that stuff in there. And so I wish there was a specific paycheck I could receive for that. But like, I'm getting enough out of it. But I wish, my God, it's like, it really worked. Like I wasn't wrong. Like it really did become part of this conversation. And I was like, and so if you were like me and you were a nerd who loved comic books, and I worked in comics, I loved all this stuff, to have it become part of the larger conversation is deeply exciting and fun for me, because it's like everybody's kind of in my world. Not everybody wants to have a room full of candy wrappers like I have, and I'm kind of grateful about that. Far more people do than they did 20 years ago, because I had almost no competition on eBay 20 years ago. It was very easy. It was very cheap. And it's not as consistently easy as it was back then. So that's the downside. Oh, other people want to buy this stuff now? That's not cool.
How dare they?
How dare they? So anyway, but yeah, so that's it. Yeah. So that's, I don't know if I think I answered your question. I think I laid down a foundation of understanding and connectivity to it. I think without that connectivity, I just don't think there was a way to hook into it to feel good about it,
No, and I think you're right, though.
Yeah.
I think
I'm
you're
going
right,
to turn
though,
this thing off.
Oh, yeah. Okay.
It's making thumping noises. There's a Gorgar pinball machine over there. I think that was its heartbeat beating. So it's a big demon.
Okay.
Yeah. Sorry.
No, you're fine.
Like, what? What's that heartbeat?
I just thought you were really excited about the topic you're talking about. So
I am. Yes, it's true.
No, but I think you're right, though, because, you talk about these foundations of geek culture. I go back to, me and my buddies getting comic books and going into the bedroom and laying a big pile of comic books on the floor, and everybody with their Coke or their Mountain Dew and their bag of chips and their Little Debbies and all these different things. And, dude, it was a 25-cent snack when I was a kid. I mean, amazing what you could get for $1 when I was a kid.
Yes.
Thank God, now I feel old and I'm going to go schedule my colonoscopy. But
they're important, people. Get them done.
It's very important. We mock it, but it's important.
No, it's important.
If you do have a colonoscopy, please record your farts afterwards. Okay. But I think about that, though. Not the farts, but the video games and the comic books. And how, like, even as a young adult, after my wife and I were married, and she was so very proud when I would go to my buddy's house and we'd all sit in a room with TVs and Xboxes linked up to play Halo, and everybody'd have their Mountain Dew and their snacks. And I see these things so very intertwined. And for me, it's all very, comic book related, but to me, I even see it more so with video games and that video game culture that started once we were able to start having these LAN parties and things like that back in the day. For me, that's very much those two things that go hand in hand. So I was kind of excited
And Mountain Dew has done a good job of leaning in, right? I think they were really the first
for sure.
That really leaned in on that. Like Mountain Dew.
Oh yeah.
What Mountain Dew has done in the branding area and that space has been brilliant. The last 15 years. Yeah, no, I mean it's the whole thing. Like I'm a ridiculously large fan of what Mountain Dew has done over the last decade and a half. It's ridiculously cool. Anyway, big fan.
Very, very smart work. Very smart work.
Mm-hmm.
All right.
Yeah.
So in the beginning of our conversation, I asked you about your origin and how we got started in this, and I told you why, because I like to know what makes people tick. This is also one of those style of questions. And I call this question suggestion time. So I'm
Okay.
curious as to what you're reading or listening to that you think everybody else should know about.
Ooh, reading or listening to? Jeez. I mean, what am I reading or listening to? Like, the thing is, I'm reading like very like specific, helpful for me books on like innovation and weird things. And, like, I don't recommend them for anybody. I'm like, because I'm trying to because I'm having these like conversations with CEOs. And I'm trying to make sure I'm kind of like, I cannot look like an idiot when I'm in them. I don't know.
that'd be
like,
bad.
what I would say is, I'm loving Pluribus on Apple TV.
Okay.
As a sci-fi nerd, I think it's got a high concept it's hard to do a high concept no one's ever done before. It's a high concept I think no one's really ever done before. But I'm very clear that, I think it's got an unusual pacing, like Severance has unusual pacing. I don't think it's for everybody. I think some people like rhythmically want something different, but like, I don't know, I'm very deeply curious about where that's going to go, but I'm also like, I love the pacing. I love that actress, and I just think it's great. So that's something I love. Like if you're a comic fan or a lapsed comic fan, like, I worked in comics professionally for many years. If you haven't looked at X-Men 97 because, that was a kid's show in the 90s, this is a sequel to that. It is not a kid's show. It's really written for the adults who grew up with the Fox X-Men cartoon.
Yes.
I was working on the X-Men. I was working on the X-Men comics, which were for adults when I was working on them while the cartoon was out. We liked the cartoon, but we also said, that's kids' adaptations of these Chris Claremont stories. But this new X-Men 97, holy shit. Like you said, chef's kiss. It's for adults. Yeah. It's incredible.
So good.
It's incredible stuff. Yeah, absolutely.
So
quite an achievement.
Yes, I would agree.
Thank God they made stuff like that. It's so enjoyable. So that's my answer to that question. I wish I had a better one that was more related to like a podcast or a book.
All good. We'll edit it, and we'll just edit it you in saying I clearly listen to the FSF podcast all the time. It'll be fine.
Absolutely. Endorsed.
Exactly. All right, Jason. We are at the point of our conversation where I need to ask you a silly question.
Oh, I like it. All right, fire away.
Okay, so this question is the result of our team member Kathleen being out and about with her daughter, who is about 6.5 now, but was about 5 at the time when this happened.
Okay, all right.
And somebody asked her daughter this question, but not Kathleen, and Kathleen was like, "Well, that's rude. You should never age out of this question." And that question is, Jason Liebig.
Yeah.
What's your favorite dinosaur?
Ooh, my favorite dinosaur. Ooh, that's a really good one. I think I'm a big fan of Triceratops. I just think they're cool.
Yes, sir.
I don't know, my experience in dinosaurs has changed so much. The Jurassic Parks, they've definitely informed different things. Look, I think as a kid, you love the T-Rex, man, right? How could you not? Because he's like the coolest one. Yeah. But I don't know. I think the brontosaurs are beautiful, They're just wonderful, peaceful, seemingly. Generally, I feel like most of the dinosaurs are just like, you do not want to interact with them. They seem like not very friendly. But the Triceratops, I feel like I could get away with. And I was also a big Land of the Lost kid in the 70s, the Sid and Marty Krofft show. But no, I think Triceratops, I just like the Triceratops. He's cool. He's got a great design. He's got that great head, it's a shield, and he's got cool guy. Triceratops is what I'm going with. Final answer.
I knew I liked you for a reason. That's also my favorite. So.
Oh, nice.
All right. Yes. Yeah. That's very cool.
Yeah.
All right, Jason. Thank you so much for being on the FSF podcast today. Where can our listeners and viewers go to find out more about you, your work, things you got coming up?
Sure. My most active social media, which I call sort of my broad social media, is my Instagram, where I share stuff, but I also sort of talk about my personal life, whatever. That's the one I'm most active in, and that's at Collecting Candy. Very simple, Collecting Candy. I'm on Instagram. I'm on other social medias, most of them actually. Usually, sometimes under Collecting Candy, sometimes under my name. It's easy enough to find. But mostly, like the things I'm working on right now that I'm excited about are all new seasons of my shows on History Channel. I've got a 7th season of The Food That Built America. It's unreal. Season 7. It's so exciting. We've got, I think, season 4 of The Mega Brands That Built America coming out. Season 2 of Hazardous History with Henry Winkler, talking about Happy Days. I get to be in a show hosted by Henry Winkler, which is surreal and wild. That's super fun. And I was just shooting for them on Monday, and we're telling some crazy stories this year. I mean, we told some pretty crazy ones last year. And then I'm doing a new show, which I think I can talk about because he talked about it. It's hosted by Mike Wolf from American Pickers. And so this show really feeds my collector thing. It's called History's Greatest Picks. And it is a show very much in the format of Food That Built America, where we tell stories. It's not really on location. And you might do some historical reenactments where they talk about great, cool, random stuff that people found that ended up being not cheap or inexpensive. It was just really cool, collectible, and notorious, and et cetera, et cetera. So telling those stories has been a kind of a fun departure for me, but also not, because it goes back to like me just being a guy who loves to go out and find things, you know? So yeah. And that's it. That's me.
All right. Very cool. Well, I'll make sure we put some links down below for not only your social media, but I'll also throw in one for your IMDb page, so that'll show all the shows that you're working on.
That's right.
Yes. If that's okay with you, I'll put that in there.
Yeah.
And let people experience the wiki of the Hollywood entertainment world. And
I'm very excited with my IMDb. I think in 2026, I'm going to hit 100 episodes of television on the IMDb. And I think no one's going to bake a cake for me. My wife might, but like only if I make her, or beg her. But I think we're going to make a cake and we're going to have a little celebration together. It's like 100 episodes of TV. I'm very excited.
You should. Absolutely. You should. That's a massive accomplishment, sir.
Yeah. And the IMDb is the place where they keep track.
Exactly.
Yes.
All right, guys. Well, if you haven't caught on already, you need to be able to go check out what Jason's got going on. There's a lot of cool stuff there. Also, though, if you haven't already, we're going to put a reminder on the screen right about now to follow our show here on YouTube. That's the most important thing you can do. That costs you exactly $0 to have fun with us. And also makes sure that we get more amazing guests like Jason here today and have these cool stories to hear about and have these fun conversations. So please consider following our show on social media. It really does help more than we can tell you. There's links down below. I mean, we make it easy for you. Or you can just click the little button right there on the screen. Again, it's made easy for you, and it costs you nothing other than just a little click, a little finger exercise, and it helps out more than you know. And be sure to check, like I said, go check out Jason's work. There's something that he's done that you're going to love. After all, he is the Indiana Jones of snacks. And if he's not proud of that, by golly, he should, because that's one of the coolest nicknames I've ever heard in my life.
I am.
So on behalf of Jason and the FSF podcast, thank you for being here. Whether you watched or listened, we appreciate it so much. And may the force be with you as you continue to live long and prosper. Goodbye.
Copyright 2026 FSF Podcast. Reference to any specific product or entity mentioned on this podcast does not constitute an endorsement or recommendation by FSF Podcast. The views expressed by guests are their own, and their appearance on the program does not imply an endorsement of them or any entity they represent. If you have any questions about this disclaimer, please contact us via email at info@fsfpodcast.com.